The House Committee on Economic Competitiveness will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Hoadley.
Here.
Representatives Bonack.
Here.
Altman.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Bagol.
Here.
DeBoyer.
Here.
St. Germain.
Here.
Grant.
Present.
Brixey.
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Kofia. Mr. Chair, you have 10 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative St. Germain makes a motion to approve the previous committee meeting, committee meeting minutes. Being no objections, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Today, the House Committee of Economic Competitiveness will hear testimony from Michigan Economic Development Corporation. Director Messer, thank you for your willingness to share your vision with the members of this committee. Please take your place there and give us your presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm honored to be joined by a number of my teammates, but at the table, it'll be my colleague Hillary Doe, who's the state's Chief Growth Officer, as well as MEDC's Chief Marketing Officer. So we'll go through the slides. My hope is that if it be your prerogative, there'll be time at the end for any questions that the members may have. So obviously very grateful for you affording us this opportunity for us to really discuss our vision for Michigan's future. Our vision is really simply the Make It in Michigan economic development strategy focused on attracting and developing people, cultivating and revitalizing places, and then competing for and winning projects. I think the important piece, and obviously we'll have a chance to discuss this throughout the presentation and hopefully in subsequent sessions, is really this strategy isn't just MEDC's. This is a strategy that was developed by the executive and legislative branches to ensure that we can be competitive and, more importantly, I think have a holistic approach. As we know, you can grow jobs, you can grow entrepreneurial opportunities, but people have to have places in which to live, to enjoy amenities. You can also, we have businesses who have opportunities, but they also need talented employees. And so our integrated approach, the Make It in Michigan strategy, focused on people, places, and project, is focused on understanding the totality of that. I also will say that the Make It in Michigan strategy, and we'll show this later on, is really built upon Michigan's heritage as being a place that makes and grows things. But on the Make It side, we are a state that arguably, certainly in North America, and I make the argument anywhere in the world, is very strong at deep tech, hard tech. And we really want to make sure that we have a policy focus on taking advantage of that unique strength. So how do we ensure that we are continuing the best growth possible? I think one of the things, and I think I'm honored that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to have us appear for this testimony, is that we're always trying to ensure that we have a continuous cycle of strategic assessment. One of my responsibilities, in addition to being CEO of MEDC, is I'm the state's Chief Competitiveness Officer. I'm a huge sports fanatic. I think that one of the things that Governor Whitmer and other leaders wanted when we went through the interview process was someone who was going to obviously make sure that we were focused on bringing a competitive analysis, real-time data and information from what our companies, our entrepreneurs are saying, and adjusting public policy to reflect that. A big part of that is obviously having the voice of our legislature. At the end of the day, you create the tools and the programming that we have an opportunity to deploy on behalf of 10 plus million Michiganders on both peninsulas. And so you can see a big part of that. We produce nearly 100 different reports that come to this various legislative groups that discuss our program performance. We're obviously making sure that we are aligned with state and federal priorities, but more importantly, we are listening to the marketplace, not only large companies, but small companies. And you will see that we have programming that is commensurate and connects to companies across the life spectrum, from our startups to some of the most iconic nameplates in America or global economic history. Oops. Before I turn over to Hillary for a slide, I want to make sure that you understand how does MEDC reach and connect within your various districts. We are divided across 10 prosperity regions. You can see the numbers there. And we have a regional prosperity team where we have colleagues who are in each of these 10 regional prosperity, working with local economic development organizations, local municipalities, businesses, in order to understand what's on the ground. So we are not trying to dictate from Lansing the fact that there's things that are going to be germane and unique to the Upper Peninsula. It's going to be very different from Metro Detroit, or different from the Thumb, or different from West Michigan. We have, and I think this is something we will explore, hopefully, if not in this session, but future sessions. We have people focus on the business development, which is a part of that business attraction and community revitalization line in the budget every year that you as legislatures approve for us. And we also have and contribute to small business centers that also are in each of the 10 prosperity regions. MEDC provides funding for those small business development centers, as well as 20 smart zones across the state, and the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center, as well as Apex Accelerators. So if we are not directly providing the technical assistance, we're working with entrepreneurial support organizations in each of these 10 regions to do so. So with that, I want to turn over to Hillary. I will drive a little bit and turn over her to talk about the investment in people as part of the Making in Michigan economic development strategy.
Thanks, and thanks to everybody again for letting us be here today and give a chance to meet you all and chat with you all. So like Quentin mentioned, there's these three key pillars of the strategy we're working towards: people, places, and projects. And when we speak about people, we thought it was important to begin by just chatting a little bit about our long-term goals and what we're looking forward to when we think about measuring success. In the people pillar, we're really hoping to, build a state where our workers feel connected to and are able to participate in the shared prosperity and economic growth, that we're building here in Michigan. And that will, of course, work to keep our talented workers here in the state. Folks will want to stay, and hopefully folks across the country will want to come and join us here as well. And so in addition to measuring some of our output metrics out of the MEDC, things like, the 5,000 plus folks that our team helped to train and make sure got connected to some of our fast growing industries here in the state, or, the interns that we helped to connect to those industries. We also long term want to really make sure that we're increasing Michigan's median income and becoming a top 10 state for median income over the long term here. This is something that Michigan, historically had been really great at, and something that we know is critical for competitiveness long term. So, this is an area that Michigan's seen some good improvement in since 2018. We've improved in our state 26%, that median income since 2018 to 2023, and seen some good early indicators, as you all may well know, like our labor participation, labor force participation has grown faster than any other state since post-pandemic. But it's also an area that we know we need to commit to and keep leaning into long term in order to achieve that top 10 goal. So I'll turn it over to Quentin to speak a little bit to some of those programs within people that we're committing to make sure we achieve this.
Thanks very much, Hillary. As Hillary mentioned, I think it's critically important to note the particular program. So let me just, I think you have these materials, and I'm grateful to my colleagues on the legislative part of our team for providing these materials and developing them. Hillary talked about the UCAN and Michigan Talent Attraction and Retention Campaign and the Michigan Career Portal. I think it's very important for us to note that we need to continue to let people know who they can be in Michigan. We've done a great job with the Pure Michigan campaign of helping people understand what they can do in Michigan, from tourism, hospitality, but we continue to see that perception lags the reality. We have a remarkably diverse economy. We have a remarkably wonderful, as someone who is a Michigander by choice. I grew up in Florida, moved to Michigan from Louisiana. I can tell you, as someone who's a non-native, the humility of Michiganders sometimes betrays us. We have to do a better job of letting people know, especially young people, young at heart, people who are beginning their entrepreneurial journey, the opportunities. We also have the Michigan Talent Solutions Division, which we will talk about, that is working with companies, getting real-time feedback, and making sure that they're making it easier for companies to connect to programs not only at MEDC, but with LEO, and also making sure that throughout government, we can make sure that they have the number one asset that companies need, which are people. People who can be upskilled, reskilled, and have flexible training. We also have the Michigander Scholars Program. We'll be highlighting that in a few moments. The Emerging Developer Toolkit, the Michigan Economic Opportunity Fund, and STEAM Ahead internships. In summary, we understand the number one asset of any company, any institution, just like your teams. You know the best part of your team are your staff. And you have to cultivate and develop your staff. We understand that we have to cultivate and develop the next generation of Michiganders who are going to help grow businesses, whether they be existing or large or new businesses. So let's talk a little bit about the Michigander Scholars Program. This is a really, it's the first of its kind. In fact, one of the reasons why our Talent Solutions team was honored by Fast Company magazine as one of the most innovative companies or organizations in the U.S. was the fact that it was innovative. This Michigan Scholars Program offers top tech and engineering students an exclusive close-up for opportunities in the mobility sector, semiconductor, and aerospace and defense sector. You see scholars from Michigan State. We have obviously working with all the university. I'm sorry, there's some.
Green.
Okay. This is not a partisan thing, but I will go white. For those who want to go blue, we'll do that. If you are a equal opportunity, if you are a Bronco or whatever your affiliation with Michigan schools, I won't go down the sports rabbit hole. This just happens to be scholars at Michigan State. But the point is because of the feedback that we've received from legislators, from companies in your district, we realized that we needed to make sure that we would make it easier for companies to reach out to young people to let them know the diversity of employment opportunities here in Michigan. We want to make sure that where we possibly can, we can make it easier for companies to continue to focus on profitable growth that will expand opportunity, and we as collectively Team Michigan on the government side create programming and opportunities for them to connect their opportunities with talent who may be educated here at our 2- and 4-year universities. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Hillary to talk about our places pillar in the Make It in Michigan economic development strategy.
Thanks, Q. So moving on to places, again, going to speak a little bit to metrics and how we measure those. Some of the things that y'all might think about when you think of places, we of course think about two that are a little bit more short term, like making sure that our sites are really appealing, attractive to businesses, things like that. Site Selection magazine, for example, ranks Michigan in the top 10, so we pay attention to those kinds of things, happy to turn over any of that information. But we wanted to, based on the topic of today and the fact that we hope to get the chance to speak to y'all many times, talk a little bit about long term what we're aiming for. And when we've talked to businesses and business leaders across our state, they've let us know how important keeping their talent in the state is and how important place is to their talent. And of course, folks across the country talk about this too. So again, to remain competitive, we know that our places will know that we've done a good job here and that our places can create and support attractive places where talent want to live and work when our folks choose to stay and when we're doing a great job attracting folks to come and join us. So achieving the largest gain in talent in the Midwest is one of those those long-term goals. And just to give you a third-party source here as well, Business Leaders for Michigan releases a great comprehensive report every year, kind of comparing Michigan to other states, relative competitiveness on a lot of these fronts, and has identified this metric specifically as one that's really important for us to keep leaning into, because we've made a lot of progress on some of the other ones, but this area is really important for our continued economic development and business growth. So from a place-based perspective, to speak to this one a little bit, we didn't pick an easy thing here. Of course, this is a difficult metric, but already we're seeing some good positive growth in the right direction. Some of our work in this area has only started in the last little bit, but even so, we were really happy to see a report we're happy to share with you all if it's of interest come out just this January, showing that relative to where we were in the 2010s, in these early years of the 2020s, Michigan's young adult population is actually growing, accelerating faster than 45 other states. And that acceleration is important. It's a good early indicator, because that we're still seeing folks leave our state domestically more often than we see them come here. We know that that's something we have to keep leaning into with sharp elbows. So you want to at least see some of that good acceleration, so we know we're going in the right direction, and we can keep working on those programs, keep narrowing that gap, and start to go positive. And we can continue to make important investments like in Michigan Main Streets, the program that you see listed there, which I have a couple of stats I wanted to share with you about today. So the Make It in Michigan Strategy's first full year was in FY24, and MEDC announced placemaking projects in that year in this bucket, the Michigan Main Streets bucket. And those projects are projected to leverage about $3.9 billion in placemaking investment, and reactivate over 6.4 million in square feet of public space, which we're really proud to share. And meanwhile, the RAP investments, which some of you may be familiar with, have nearly doubled. So from FY22, they were able to leverage about $500 million in private investment, compared to where we are today, where they're leveraging almost $950 million in private investment for FY24. So we're happy those place-based investments continue to overperform. Excited to continue partnering with our business community who are supportive of this work, and want to keep seeing those numbers go in the right direction.
Thanks, Hillary. And I think it's worth call out that the thesis when we talk about the Make It in Michigan strategy, focus on people, places, and project, is what's on the slide here. People want to live and work in vibrant places, and then places need businesses to grow. So want to make sure that throughout this presentation, throughout our conversations, we maintain that through line, that there is this very much integrated need, and that's the reason why we have this three-pronged strategy. Let me talk with a little bit of specificity. Hillary talked about the Michigan Main Street program. I want to talk about some of our other place-based or place-making programming, the redevelopment ready communities. We have over 50 communities that have participated in that, and basically provide a signal to not only real estate developers, but also site selectors and others who are looking to make investment decision, that those communities have done the necessary thing, from permitting to community approvals to preparation for any sort of abatements or preparation for the legislative tools that you develop. So that's a program that's part of our placemaking. The community revitalization program I talked about earlier, that $100 million business attraction and community revitalization budget line, that's a part of that. The revitalization and placemaking program, or RAP, many of you may be aware of that. Many districts across Michigan have received programming there. The Build Michigan Community, Public Places, Public Spaces, Community Places program, as well as Brownfield program. The point is, there is a comprehensive set of tools, many of which that this legislature and prior legislators have created, that we're now making and putting to good use to ensure that we are creating vibrant places that people want to live, spend money, discretionary income, but also places where businesses can grow and thrive. Let me just talk about one particular business that received a revitalization and placemaking award So this company, Ordock Brewery, $7.8 million in private investment. They received a competitive revitalization and placemaking award for $3.9 million. This is a mixed-use development, which features Ordock Brewing Company storefront. I happen to have a pair of Ordock Brewing Company socks, now that I think about it. And they have good swag, by the way. They have 4 new housing units and placemaking components like outdoor entertainment areas, urban green spaces, and public infrastructure projects. They also later received a Match on Main grant support from the City of Marquette through support from MEDC, allowing additional capacity to spur additional investment. And then finally, they received a brownfield TIF to remediate blight on the site. This is a great case study of how programs are not duplicative, but perfectly aligned to support and stimulate and grow businesses that are successful, that are in the process of changing their communities, and how we can build to continue to accelerate their contributions to our community. I would turn back over to Hillary to talk about the projects part of the Make It in Michigan Economic Development Strategy.
Okay, last pillar here. So this is our projects pillar. So again, we started with people, we did place, and now we're in projects. And when you think about projects, you might think of one specific kind of economic development. But in this pillar, we actually measure our small business investments, our entrepreneurship and innovation investments, so startup investments, as well as maybe business attraction and the retention of companies that are already here. And so it's really important to us that we're helping businesses launch and grow at the same time as we're attracting, retaining, and growing businesses and accelerating high-tech innovation in the state. So a couple ways that we think about measuring that include trying to really crack into being a top 10 state in job growth in some of our focus industries, which we'll speak to a little bit about what those are. We think about focus industries both as some of those fast-growing industries that are important to our state as a whole, as well as some industries that might be more heavily important in certain regions. So across the state, you might think about mobility, advanced manufacturing, semiconductors. In some regions, you might think about agriculture, for example, because of course, Michigan is critical across the country in our agriculture. So when we think about being a top 10 state in job growth in our focus industries, Michigan has added 46,000 jobs in our targeted focus industries between 2021 and 2024. And to give you some context, in absolute job numbers, that ranks fifth in the country, behind only California, Texas, Florida, and New York. So first in the Midwest in absolute numbers. And in terms of growth, it's 14th, so growth between 21 and 2024 in total number of jobs, but second in the Midwest, behind only Illinois, to give you a sense. And from the new business starts perspective, we're 14th for small business growth and 4th among Midwestern states. So that's one we can keep chasing and pursuing and make sure, we get a number one up there as we continue to move forward. But we're, happy to be in the top 5 there and want to keep moving forward. From a whole country perspective on those new business starts, referencing again that really comprehensive Business Leaders for Michigan report, they have Michigan ranked 11, so just outside the top 10 for new business starts nationwide. I'll turn it over to you, Q.
Thanks so much, Hillary. So want to make sure that throughout all this work, and I think you know this as people who have dedicated your lives to public service, economic development matters only because people matter. So throughout this presentation, you've seen the faces of friends and neighbors across both peninsulas. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the programming that supports our project pillar of the Make It in Michigan Economic Development Strategy, including the Michigan Business Development Program. I've talked about that BACR line that's in the budget, that's been annual $100 million. That comes and is associated with our projects pillar. Early stage funding for companies that are beginning to launch, Match on Main small business grant program, small business lending, manufacturing technology support as companies figure out how to deal with AI or robotics or Industry 4.0, want to make sure especially our small and medium-sized manufacturers can continue to be able to compete. And for many of them, they are the anchors of a lot of communities on both peninsulas. They sponsor the Little League team. They buy the Access Girl Scout cookies. They, pay for the band uniforms and all those things as part of their support. The Strategic Site Readiness Program, one of the things I always tell people is that you never know who's looking at you. It's sort of the reason why we have homeowners association and covenants and communities. Similarly, you never know what company is looking to potentially cite or bring investment to Michigan. We want to make sure that our sites are there and ready, and so that's been a very successful program. And then our critical industry program, regardless of federal administration, and we already see this in the very early days of the Trump-Vance administration, there will be federal industrial policy. You've heard President Trump talk about significant support for AI. You've talked about the U.S. creating a sovereign investment fund. We want to make sure that regardless of where, as the continuing evolving federal industrial policy goes, that Michigan can bring a disproportionate number of those federal dollars back to Michigan. Because regardless of what's announced at the federal level, there will be a required state match. Because the president's focus is bringing back manufacturing to the U.S. He didn't say what particular 50 states. And so we have to make sure that we are competitive and continuing to press the case for Michigan as the best place for any manufacturing that comes, I would argue, not only in the U.S., but just North America. So Hillary alluded to focus industries. I want to state up front, I alluded to, we are a state that makes things and grows things. Agribusiness, hard tech, deep tech. But we also have a list of businesses that have statewide impact, as you can see. I won't read them on the page. I think you have the materials. The overall arcing thing I would say is, if you look at those statewide impact industries, more than likely they will be a part of whatever federal industrial policy the Trump-Vance administration ultimately announced. You will see continued desire to bring those back to the U.S., and we need to make sure that we have the tools. And I'm grateful for the legislature for passing the R&D tax incentive, creating an innovation fund. I know that there are conversations about my hire as well as others. But these things are going to be critically important if we as Michigan are going to rise among the 50 states and I think assume our rightful place as being the place where companies who are looking to develop highly advanced manufacturing come. And why is that so important? Because our tier 2, tier 3 suppliers benefit from being in close proximity to large companies who can pay on time and pay quickly and provide certitude as they forecast needed growth and needed investment. We obviously talked about, when we showed you the map about the 10 prosperity regions, we understand the importance of tourism, outdoor recreation, the importance of agribusiness, financial services in Southeast Michigan and elsewhere, and logistics. I think increasingly, as we deal with extreme weather and greater variability in weather, Michigan's a relatively stable in climate. The fact that we're 500 miles within over half of the U.S. population will benefit us from a logistics standpoint, and we're going to be able to leverage that, especially combined with some of the educational attainment, the fact that we have great educational programs in logistics, supply chain management, packaging also. That shows the continued integration of the Make It in Michigan strategy focused on people, places, and projects. Let me talk a little bit about 20 Fathoms up in Traverse City. They are a recipient of a Small Business Support Hub grant, entrepreneurial support organization that is really taking advantage of the fact that a lot of people from all across the world, arguably, have discovered or rediscovered Traverse City, not just a place to vacation, but increasingly people are moving, bringing their businesses, and wanting to start businesses there. And 20 Fathoms is one of the small business supporting hubs that helps there. We have other hubs across the state that are doing similar work. They are also been working to create an entrepreneurial in residence program focused on harnessing the state's proximity to the Great Lakes. You know, we should continue to take advantage of not only the best asset, which are our friends and neighbors, but our proximity to 20% of the world's fresh water, the proximity to scenic beauty that inspires people not only artistically, but to solve business problems. I'll turn it back over to Hillary as she talks about the UCAN and Michigan Talent Campaign. Earlier I talked about the iconic Pure Michigan campaign, which continues to be supported by legislators and in the governor's rec. There was additional support. But as I said, we have to not only tell people what they can do in Michigan with the Pure Michigan campaign, but who they can be in Michigan. And UCAN in Michigan helps to do that.
Thanks, Q. Yeah, I think the team thought it would be a good example to share with all of you, just in part because we talked about people, places, and projects, and this is an interesting example of all three of those pillars, I think, coming together, and so we thought it'd be a quick way to give you a comprehensive example of that. So from a maybe projects perspective, business leaders across the state and some of our survey work let us know that their biggest barrier to expansion was talent. You all may know that we have tens of thousands of open jobs in Michigan right now, and some of the fastest growing industries in the country are the Department of Energy, for example, has named Michigan the fastest growing energy job sector in America, and we want to make sure that those businesses can stay here and scale here and hire talent here. So they were encouraging in terms of us making sure that we can connect our existing talent here to those jobs and ensure that folks across the country can join us here. And similarly, our communities across the state, especially perhaps some of our rural communities, as well as some of our cities, have really named that population declines, or have been painful in their communities, and we're excited to participate in a talent campaign. So our economic development partners across the state and our regional partners across the state have all participated in the creation of the talent campaign, which has been great. So we took, maybe this is places, some of that iconic place-based imagery from the Pure Michigan campaign and kind of extended it to include images of places you can live in Michigan, some of the jobs that you can have in Michigan, and leveraged a great career portal that's really a first of its kind AI-driven career portal to connect folks interested in Michigan through the campaign to land on that career portal and connect them to Michigan jobs. And a lot of folks when they talk about these campaigns talk about impressions and brag about the millions of impressions that they get. I could do that, but I think we're all probably more interested in how many folks got all the way down the funnel and said, hey, yeah, I'm interested in living and working in Michigan. And in the about 18 plus months this campaign had been out there, we got 27,000 folks interested in that, and that was a huge number to start. So we were excited about that. The campaign's also sparked other states to follow our lead. So when we launched, it was a really, unique effort. And now Minnesota, Maryland, Virginia, or West Virginia, rather, others have followed our lead. But the campaign still has won tons of awards, which has been exciting to see. 4 IEDC Excellence Awards, 11 Telly Awards, others. And I think it's also been really interesting to see, you've seen some of the perception lifts, improvement, perception of Michigan careers and quality of life. But I think it's also been interesting to see the top states for applicants. So in terms of folks applying to jobs who were out of state, the top states for applicants were Texas, California, Illinois, and New York, which I thought was interesting and nice to see that folks across the country really, appreciate and are excited about a Michigan message. Great.
Thanks so much, Hillary. We're rounding the bend toward home. So wanted to make sure that obviously it's your prerogative, and as I said to the chair earlier, I will come as often as you will stand to have me or have colleagues come and talk to you. But wanted to provide some thoughts about future topics. You can see there. Obviously, there will be others. But the point is that this should be a conversation. At the end of the day, as members of the legislative branch, we respond to you. I work for you. My colleagues work for you. We want to provide as best possible information. You will help decide ultimately how the strategy gets shaped, changed, altered, and we will do our best to implement that. And so these are just topics for your consideration. And with that, I thank you. Our contact information is there. I will also give you, for those of you who don't have it, I'll give you my personal mobile. It is area code 225-235-225-235-30. And with that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Director Messer. Thank you, Hillary, for your presentation and your testimony today. We'll open it up for member questions. And right now we have Representative Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Messer, thank you so much for being here. You and your team, Hillary, thank you for being here. A couple of things. Just one, I just want to say thank you. As you mentioned competitiveness many times, and obviously we're in Big Ten country, so there's a lot of that around here. But the tools that MEDC has been deploying, I know that's something that I've been able to see in my district. In particular, when we talk about the revitalization and placemaking grants, I mean, the amount of investment, private investment that's come in due to those grants have been significant, not only, as you mentioned, for public spaces, but also development and that partnership that you've had with our economic development organizations. The question that I have is, as legislators, and I've talked with your team a number of times, just there's so many things that I don't even know about that happen in my district that you all are a part of in terms of retention and also attraction. How can we be better ambassadors, for these opportunities? Because I know Tupac gives me a stack this thick of here are the things that are going on in your district. But how are there ways or ideas that you may have that us as legislators can do to be ambassadors, for this development coming or these opportunities that MEDC has to grow private investment, create jobs within our district?
Sure, I'll begin, and I'll obviously allow Hillary to comment. I really think there are maybe three things. There are a lot, but let me just try to focus maybe on three particular things. I think the first is if you or when you're having coffee hours in your district, or you're having town halls, or you're meeting with businesses, invite us. I talked about, let me go back to the slide. We have regional support teams. So I think having MEDC, not necessarily every one of your sessions, but if there's one that's germane for businesses, have us there. I think that'll be very helpful. I think the second is really we need to continue, and I have to take the onus of this, is continuing to explain and make plain and discernible, because you've got other matters besides just this committee. Things that you can pull out, your staff can pull out to say, here is how you access the MEDC. Here are the what must be truths for support. One thing I think it might be on the final slide, but let me make sure that all of you have the website for the MEDC. It is www.michiganbusiness.org, www.michiganbusiness.org. It's very searchable. It's very easy. I think that's the second one. The third thing that I would suggest is, and we've done this, I've done this frequently, is when we go on company visits, we can reach out to you and say, hey, would you like to join us? So that you're hearing in real time from companies that have either received support that you have created through legislatively, and has to go through the Michigan Strategic Fund, or companies that haven't. So you can in real time hear that. I think that will make it easier for you and your staff. And if you can't attend, invite your staff to attend. We've gone out across this great state with legislators and staff of both parties. So those are just three opportunities that I think, and I'm happy to attend caucus meetings, whatever it may, or come to this committee as much as desire to continue to make it easier for people to understand the through line and how their district, their communities fit in that strategy. Hillary?
I think you covered a lot of it. The only other thing I will say is to put my colleagues on the spot, because we have external affairs colleagues here, and I think you volunteered for this before, but if not, I'll volunteer you now. I think that they have offered to make sure that, you know, they can be sort of concierge support for all of you. I know sometimes folks call and want access to, you know, a small business program or, you know, something in your district, and you want to be able to connect them to the right program and get them the support that they need or point them in the right direction. And we want to make sure, of course, that's as easy as possible for you. So I know our external affairs team has offered to make sure you have a direct point of contact to one of them so that they can be helpful in navigating all those available programs.
Thank you. And yeah, I would absolutely love to be more in the loop on what's happening in our individual districts, not as just a one-way street just for you to advise us as to what you're doing, but us also acting as a conduit as what services you can provide, you know, to the businesses or business development within our district. So I'm very pleased to hear that. Representative Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today and talking about the work that's being done across the state. One of the, I have two questions if that's okay, but my first question stems from a conversation that I was actually having with the chair about places that we can find to work together this session. And a lot of that conversation hinged around smaller businesses, the local businesses. I think that is an issue across the aisle that a lot of people are passionate about. And so I know that we've had conversation in the past about smaller sites, smaller possibly brownfield sites or unused sites that many of us have in our district. They wouldn't fit a mega site, but a smaller mid-sized business could come. And so my question is, are there tools available where we can either attract businesses, maybe perhaps in the same way that the larger corporation conversation has happened, or that we can help businesses that we already have in our districts to scale up, you know, may not offer thousands of jobs, but maybe a 50 to 100 person job that could really make a deep impact in our communities.
Sure, let me begin, and obviously Hillary can chime in. I think that one thought I would have is maybe, and I'm happy to do this, is this may sound pedantic, but maybe have a session 30, 45 minutes where we literally walk through the MEDC website. Because we do have, with this committee or whoever you want, where we can show that we do have programming. You know, I went back to this slide because we have the Michigan Main Street program. We have public spaces, community places. We have a brownfield program, rep grant, that can directly support those type of opportunities. That's just on the places part of our Make It in Michigan economic development strategy. But if I go back to the projects pillar, let me just talk about other programs. And maybe one of the things I have to do better is to make it easier for you to see where those programs are on our website, because they're publicly available. I happily, we can do a web, or whatever you want to do. It's really up to you as elected officials. But we do have early stage funding. We have a match on Maine Small Business Grant Program. We have small business lending. All these things are designed for companies that are medium-sized businesses. But more importantly, is we can tell you the what must be truths that's required. I think sometimes companies say, okay, I see that, well, now I'm immediately eligible. Well, justifiably so, the legislature makes it difficult for public dollars to go out the door. There's a certain set of what must be truths that have to be surmounted. So we can do that. Again, our website is www.michiganbusiness.org. We have these programs. We want to make it easier for you, your staff, partners, whether it's the various chambers, whether it's our economic regional economic development partners, working with the city of Grand Rapids or the right place in your particular case, to make it easier for people to understand what those programs are at the state level. Hillary?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it sounds like one of the specific questions in there was about site readiness and site preparedness, maybe, and the sort of programs and tools available for those, and limitations specifically on some of those programs and tools. So that could also be one of the good follow-ups. I know our colleague Michelle Wildman and maybe others could be helpful, kind of walking through what current tools are available for those and what the limitations are, for example. I also know some existing programs might be, for example, sunsetting, that would be helpful to know about, perhaps, just so y'all could make whatever decisions on those, because ultimately, as Quentin always says, we'll do everything we can to ensure Michigan's competitive with whatever decisions you all make. but I think Michelle would be the right person to speak to that. Do you think that's right for site readiness and preparedness?
We'll make it a team approach.
Yeah.
We will bring as many people to make it easier for you to understand what's already available in the public domain, sort of walk through how we think about working with the local and regional partners in each of your districts, and then more importantly, helping companies understand the what must be truths. Because what we've found, and I've spoken to companies across the spectrum, some of the largest companies in the world to 1 to 2 person shops, and for all of them, these things have to be done in order to provide for MEDC to recommend support, and then most importantly, for the Michigan Strategic Fund Board to approve it. I think that's critically important as we manage expectations.
Thank you. Representative Bagol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk about non-disclosure agreements for a minute. I'm going to quote you. You said, "Economic development matters because people matter." And I just want to see what you mean by that, because the Mundy Township megasite is in my area. And my understanding is you signed a non-disclosure agreement, as did a lot of other MEDC members, which did not take into consideration the voice of the people who live there that are affected by it, and it did not provide me a seat at the table when any of those discussions took place as to what may be coming to my district. And now more information is being rolled out. We know what it is. And I'm just wondering, are you going to take that same approach going forward? I think if there was more transparency when it comes to these projects coming in, that maybe you could win people over, you could squash the rumors and things like that. Maybe that's something you could advocate for going forward, instead of just being, hiding everything and everything. I mean, it obviously doesn't set well with me when I have all those constituents to answer to. So just like to hear your response on non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah, sure. So I appreciate the question. Let me suggest the following. Personally, as someone who has publicly given my personal phone number to people across the state, I have no problem with transparency. One of the things that we have to balance is the following. We have projects across the world who come in and say, look, we are possibly disclosing, and these are publicly traded companies sometimes, some of them are privately traded companies, who have consultants who say, look, we are interested in Michigan because of the attractiveness of the talent, the site, whatever set of conditions. If you want to be a part of this competition, here's a non-disclosure agreement. If you want to enter into the game, here's the agreement. We have a decision to make. If we don't sign the agreement, we don't get to participate. But what's critically important to understand, and I know you understand this, Mr. Representative, is before any dollar is committed, Michigan has one of the most public, transparent processes. As I mentioned, and I will stress, MEDC only recommends projects. The Michigan Strategic Fund Board approves the process. Before a project is approved, there are memos, there's a public meeting that goes before this legislative body. Currently, under statute, if these projects receive large-scale funding support, it has to go before both the House and Senate Appropriations Committees. I think obviously we have encouraged companies of all sizes that, look, the more that you can, without violating SEC regulations, the Security and Exchange Commission's regulation, the better to squash rumor, conjecture, whatnot. But the fact of the matter is, when given the opportunity, do we allow Michigan to compete versus Michigan not being able to compete? I'm always going to be on the side of 10 million Michiganders who have asked me to every day think about how to make Michigan compete. And if it's legal, moral, ethical, I'm going to do that. Non-disclosure agreements are permissible. They should not be blanket. But if they are a gating item for companies to even consider Michigan, I do not want Michigan to be discarded or not considered out the gate.
So it sounds like you support them.
What I've tried to state is I support Michigan being able to compete for opportunities, and I do not want Michigan prematurely excluded from competing for opportunities.
Even if that closes the door on the people most affected by the project.
Well, what I would suggest to you, it does not. I'll happily talk, but this, I would argue, does not close the door or prevent people from being affected, because there is a local process, and the men and women, our friends and neighbors across this state, have an opportunity to opine on those projects. So a non-disclosure does not prevent their participation.
I would disagree.
Okay.
I mean, it may be in the planning and zoning process they can participate, but if they have no idea what's coming and what's not, I mean, I think it closes the door on what their opinions are. I mean, they're the ones that are most affected. And again, because it had to do with me, not having a seat at the table, not being able to represent anybody because I didn't have any of the information that you all had. I mean, I would just encourage you in the future to reconsider the non-disclosure agreements.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you guys for being here. I'm sure you're going to have a litany of questions, but appreciate the insight. So I think we can all agree that responsible investment is important for our state. And, we can encourage growth that way responsibly. Return on investment's also really important. And I think that's something that you probably heard from us before. And I think in recent times we've seen some instances where we've invested in companies, significantly invested in companies, and then they've either sold, closed up shop, left the state, and there's no provision for us to get any of that money back that we invested. How would you see MEDC moving forward to ensure that when we invest in these companies, they're not selling or moving out of the state without returning some of that taxpayer money?
Yeah, sure. I think the only thing I would say, I just want to make sure that we have alignment on the fact base. In every agreement that I'm aware of, there are provisions for clawbacks, meaning if the company breaches whatever agreement by either moving, reducing headcount, whatever, there's a provision for the state of Michigan to claw back or garnish or get repaid dollars that have already gone out the door. So there is a mechanism already in place for that to happen. We have within MEDC a compliance team that monitors compliance with all our agreements. So there are particular milestones that have to be done. Most of our agreements are what I would call performance reimbursable, meaning before a dollar goes out, the company has to perform. And so they're reimbursed on basically an expenditure. So I just want to make sure that we're aligned on the fact base with regard to already the current ability for companies to receive those, the conditions for companies to receive the dollars, and also the protections and the serious fiduciary responsibilities that we take, and I take personally, regarding Michigan taxpayer dollars.
And I think we may have some discrepancies on some things. I mean, I think in recent history we've seen investments into companies, promises for a certain number of jobs, but then we see in another part of the state they lay off that same number of jobs. So it appears that it's a shell game with taxpayer money. And I also think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was a recent investment into a company and they sold. Did we claw any of that money back when they sold that company?
Without knowing the specifics, company that you're referencing, I can't. I mean, we have almost, over 1 million companies in Michigan, so I don't know which of the million about which you're speaking. I'm happy to discuss at any point, but I want to be crystal clear that any dollar that goes out to a company is in an agreement with clawback provisions. That's A. B, any action that is a change of control, we have provisions that guard the taxpayers of the state of Michigan from change of control provisions to ensure that companies aren't doing that. And you talked about if a company lays off someone on this side of the state and hires on this side, depending on the contract, and I would argue most contracts, so without talking specifics, I have to provide a general response. We have baseline employment requirements. So every incentive that we may provide that's approved by the Michigan Strategic Fund is an incentive for net new job creation. So it would be impossible for a company to lay off somebody over here and then for that same number over here. Now, I don't know the specifics. We can talk offline. That could be a subject of a future. That's really up to the legislators. But without knowing the specifics, I'll have to respond in that manner.
Thank you. I'll follow up with you. I'll send you some articles.
Okay.
Thank you. Representative Altman?
Sorry, I'm kind of straddling two mics here. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Quentin and Hillary, for being here to present. I'm just wondering what sort of changes we're seeing at the federal level and how that might impact your programs here in Michigan, and also specifically what impacts the elimination or change in funding for the CHIPS Act might have moving forward. Could you touch on that briefly?
Yeah, sure. Let me suggest the following, and obviously Hillary can respond if she desires, but a couple of things. One, I alluded to it in the presentation. My hypothesis, I think this is a strong hypothesis of elected officials in both the legislative and executive branch at the state level as well as our federal congressional delegation. The Trump-Vance administration supports bringing advanced manufacturing to Michigan. Not necessarily to Michigan, but to the U.S. We hope and we want to compete to bring that to Michigan. Consequently, I believe that we have to continue to make sure that Michigan is as game ready as we possibly can be. And so, without knowing the specificity, and let's just be clear, we have to give the Trump-Vance administration time. They just filled out their team. They didn't even have a full squad until the labor secretary was approved, I think, earlier this week. So we have to give them time to get a practice in, get a playbook. I listened to Commerce Secretary Lutnick this morning, just on Bloomberg Radio, talk about the CHIPS Act. I think it's an open question of what happens with the CHIPS Act. I think one thing that gets lost in all the noise is that the CHIPS Act was President Trump's idea during his first administration. And I think we need to recapture that. I think Commerce Secretary Lugnut talked about that this morning. We won't know for a while. I think let's get to April 2nd. That is sort of an initial gating item as they deal with tariffs. Let's see what happens. Let's continue the conversation. But we know that if we want to make sure that we have a durable, commercially important, but important from a defense mechanism, our national defense, there has to be a domestic chip industry. And we understand that there are certain category of chip makers that we still don't have in the U.S. And I imagine the Trump-Vance administration will want to see them happen.
And I completely agree. And I've seen a lot of rhetoric, that contradicts one another. But have we spent taxpayer dollars prepping that Monday Township site?
Yes, I mean, we have, but let's be clear. That Mundy Township site, the Advanced Manufacturing District of Genesee County, is one of the best available manufacturing sites in North America. So whether or not, so there are a lot of companies. In fact, we got inquiry early this week. Hey, is it still available? So this is not preparation for a single use. We can pivot to other use that are in accordance with the desires of the community that, allows it to be viable. The point is, I am very confident that that will be a site that will have tremendous commercial viability and be a great use of taxpayer dollars because it's one of the most desirable sites in North America for any advanced manufacturer who needs a large site connected to power, availability with water, proximity to major population centers. Thank you. Hillary, I'm sorry, I jumped off my bad.
Thank you. Representative Bonak.
Thank you, by the way, for your presentation. I wanted to ask something about what MEDC's stance is on state regulations. Just talking, for instance, I had a meeting with the Michigan Manufacturers Association, and there was nothing specific, but just talking about, for instance, coming up with a product here in the state of Michigan and elsewhere in some other, let's say, state or country, that it might take 2 years here to get approval, where somewhere else the approval is a lot less time. I also heard about agriculture and some of the problems with Eagle and some of the regulations. What is MEDC's stance on state regulation? Is that a concern of yours that we may be over-regulating here in this state?
I would answer it this way. I believe that my colleagues in the sister state agencies are doing the best they can in accordance with state statute, which I think is what I think is important and encouraging is that we heard the governor not only in her State of the State, but in the Road Ahead address talk about streamlining permitting. She already had issued an executive directive last year for state agencies. Where now also she's talked about removing red tape and bureaucracy. That's something that we across the cabinet, working with tremendous leadership from Director Roos at Eagle or Director Dr. Boring at MDART, I am confident that we're going to see an improvement. It is not something I can be concerned about because my focus is whatever deck of cards I'm dealt, I'm going to play to my maximum ability. And as I tell people all the time, I would rather have the Michigan hand than any other state in America or any province in North America. And so I think we always be better, bottom line. We talked about here, our philosophy at MEDC is to make sure that, I want to get back to here, that cycle of continuous strategic assessment. I think you've seen that with regard to permitting and regulation, and I think that we're going to be better for it.
Thank you. Representative Brixey.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to ask two questions. I have two questions for you. So the first question, I'm looking at this map slide. And my first question is, I think we can all agree, everybody on this committee and probably everybody in the legislature can all agree that one of the things that we'd like to see happen in Michigan and in the United States of America is for our American companies who have factories overseas bring some of those factories back here. I think we can probably all agree to that. So I see you have these regional support teams, and we've been talking about you've been questioned about the non-disclosure agreements with relation to the Mundy Township site. Now, I've been in government for 25 years, started out on my zoning board of appeals and planning commission and township board, and moved my way through, and I know that these projects, when they come, we have really good, thorough, open meetings, legislation at the local level here in Michigan. And when you go through any project in a township, nothing's decided in 2 weeks. I mean, these things take years to combine the properties together. Can you tell me, my first question is, can you tell me if there weren't non-disclosure agreements, what happens to land prices, or what happens to stock valuations and that type of thing if information about a publicly traded company's plans for investment in another area and perhaps retraction out of a different area? What does that do to their project?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have, because Michigan is such an international state, we are attracting investment not only domestically but internationally. So depending on the securities laws of a particular home nation, it could, one, subject people to being considered insiders. So you could get into possible questions of insider trading and stock manipulation, which could possibly provide not only criminal but civil penalties, is one. Two, companies are operating competitive industries. And so companies, in particularly for these advanced manufacturing where the CapEx is the capital expenditure is such a big part of their financial health and statements, it would potentially be a signaling effect and could potentially, if the project was not to come to fruition, could potentially devastate the stock valuation of that company. And then last, I think for the people on the ground, it could potentially run the risk, again, of people could have information that if they were to act on it without, making sure that it was in accordance with the applicable securities law, could subject them inadvertently to possible civil and criminal penalties. So this is not something that we take lightly. And that's why especially publicly traded companies have to go through a pretty rigorous process of what information is being shared with whom.
So then the second question I have is, when I look at this Mundy Township project in particular, one of the things that is pretty exciting to me is that it looks to me like you can get 4 different regions that will have economic impact from it. So my district, I'm here in Ingham County, and my district goes all the way over to the Livingston and Shiawassee border. Now, we've got tons of rural folks living on family farms, and we have a terrible thing that's been happening in Michigan for a couple generations, and that is that young people grow up on the family farm but cannot find work in their rural area. And Michigan is a really unique state in terms of our agricultural industry, in that because we have so much agricultural diversity, and many of these crops that we have are very niche crops, you have a lot of really small family-owned operations that have been, growing their cherries or their cucumbers for generations, and they work outside the home. They have a small farm, but they are also working outside the home to maybe subsidize the farm or to be able to continue living the life that they want to live with that rural lifestyle and that farm lifestyle. So when I heard about this project, I was really excited because, for my folks, even here in Lansing, for my folks, to get there, it's less than 40 minutes. And the folks in the eastern part of my district, which is the more economically depressed part, with fewer availability of jobs, these are jobs that young people can, in rural areas, can go to and make great wages, but still keep that family farm that they have if they want to. So my second question is, hearing some of the questions about the process and sort of the illusion that somehow MEDC is taking away the public process. Is there anything that MEDC does to these jobs that preempts the local community's land use decisions with regards to these projects?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. No, ultimately, Michigan is a strong home rule state. Everything that we do is a recommendation that ultimately has to be decided upon by local leaders, from zoning to particular type of local abatements. So no, there's no preemption on the part of MEDC.
Representative DeBoyer.
Thank you, Chair Holdley. I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys taking the time. This is a gigantic issue to get arms around and understand. So really, clearly you do have your arms around it, Quentin. I appreciate that in your explanations on things. But, there's a few things that I think that concern me, and I'll try to be as brief as I can, Chair Holdley. 3, 4, 5 times you said that what you're trying to do is you're trying to make Michigan competitive, which is an admirable thing, and I appreciate your efforts to do that. My question would be to you, without MEDC, what are the pitfalls of Michigan? Why are we not competitive?
Yeah, I want to be clear. I want to suggest that I'm not suggesting that Michigan is not competitive. Let me use I want to go back to sports. The Big Ten was one of the premier conferences in intercollegiate athletics, but always it understands it has to continue to compete. So the Big Ten decided that they needed to make sure that they had television markets not only here in the Midwest. That's why they picked up Rutgers in order to bring in the New York market. They also, so they continued to do that. They were still one of the premier conferences. They also saw what was happening with the SEC. They saw what was happening with the Big 12. Then they said, okay, we understand that what's going to drive revenue for intercollegiate athletics is TV rights. So that's why they decided to go west, to expand to the West Coast, and picked up USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. What's the analogous for Michigan? Michigan is competitive, but we understand that other places aren't standing still. So we have to continue to make sure to refine our tools, to continue to develop our greatest assets, the men and women who live here, continue to work on streamlining regulation, continue to make sure that we bring tools like R&D, make it easier for companies of all sizes to access the tools that you, the legislature, create. Those are things that we always have to do. and we have to constantly be in a process of self-evaluation as we see what's signaling from our competition. So I wouldn't say that Michigan is non-competitive. It's just our competition isn't sitting still. States as diverse as Massachusetts to Louisiana to Texas to Oklahoma are creating more and more tools. Some modeled after what we do in Michigan. And so given that environment, it's my obligation to say to you, what's happening in the marketplace.
Sure, and I appreciate that, and I understand your role, and I'm not doubting what your role is, and under that circumstance that you are speaking, it's necessary. But when does it end? When does it end? When does the shifting of taxpayer dollars over to a governmental agency to allocate out to businesses end? When does that stop? When Indiana or Ohio or Florida or Massachusetts bumps their ante, does Michigan then bump their ante? Because at some point, the idea behind government programs is to fix a problem of economic competitiveness. I don't see an end to this. I just see the ante being bumped every moment. That's why I'm concerned. With regard to the non-disclosures that we just spoke about, I appreciate the idea as analysis of how stocks are going to be affected. But the truth is the corporation that you're working with, while you sign a non-disclosure, does not have to be divulged. The name does not have to be divulged. So the idea that if we don't have NDAs across the board, or if legislators don't sign NDAs so they can't have any information, is not accurate. They are entitled to information. You do not have to disclose the name of a corporation. So that is a fallacy that we're doing it because we want to protect somebody's stock value. My question also to you, based on a statement you made, would be simply this. How much have we clawed back?
With regard to clawbacks, I think you have to talk about particular fiscal years. I can certainly provide that information to you.
How long have you been in existence? How long has MEDC been? I apologize, you may have said that. How long have you been in existence?
MEDC has been in existence since 1999. It was created under then Governor Engler.
Under control, under direction by you for how long?
Since 2021, so over 3.5 years.
So how much have we clawed back in 3.5 years?
I will have to get the particular numbers, but we certainly have clawed back dollars since then as part of our compliance process.
Mm-hmm. And when someone doesn't meet their contract standards that they entered under in an MEDC or a SOAR dollar allocation, do you renegotiate those contracts?
Colleagues renegotiate that, but we don't renegotiate in isolation. Because of the way the statute is written, we have to bring some of those contracts back to the legislature. But I want to just, if I may, Mr. Representative, just clear up one thing. I never said, we were talking about NDAs.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't talk about legislative NDAs at all. What I said was, the question was a general question about NDAs. It was not specific to legislators. So I want to be clear. My response was into the general questions about legislators, about the general question about NDAs, not legislative NDAs. Ultimately, to your first question, when does it end? I stated it in the beginning, and I will stand by. We will use whatever tools the legislature creates. It is ultimately the legislature and executive branches who determine whatever tools we have. And we will compete and do the best we can with whatever we have.
So on the question of the renegotiation of contracts, how many of those renegotiations of contracts have been an upward renegotiation as opposed to a downward renegotiation of expectation?
I will have to provide an exact answer, but I will tell you, it's rarely, the only time we would negotiate and recommend additional funding is if the company has exceeded whatever investment in terms of capital expenditure or job creation or positive payroll impact. Those would be the only three conditions by which a company would receive additional dollars after the first contract or grant agreement is negotiated.
My last question, Chair. When you measure your results, your outcome, because you made some statements about job creations. Is that measurement against what that business employs, or is that measurement against the totality of employment in the state of Michigan?
Give me the question
Sure.
one more time, because I'm trying to
if
make sure
ABC, pest control comes to you with a program, and they currently employ 12 people, and when they're done, they employ 100, right? We've gained those 88 employees, right? Or are you measuring against your productivity against total job creation in the state of Michigan?
I think there are two different questions in there. With regard to the enforcement of a particular grant agreement for ABC pest control, it will be on their net new job creation, ensuring that there has been a positive state payroll tax contribution. With regard to MEDC's own performance, it is overall net new job growth statewide for the state of Michigan. Did you want to say something?
And that's a trend that's been upward in your 3.5 years and in the 20+ years of MEDC?
Yeah, that's that total job
Yeah.
number that we were reporting.
Yes, I can't, I would have to look back at the arc of the all over 25 years of MEDC's creation, but the question for us is always win share. Obviously, if there's the economy overall has challenges like it did in 2008 or 2009, it will probably be unlikely that Michigan grew jobs during that era, but certainly we've seen year-over-year growth during my tenure. That's not to suggest that there isn't work to be done.
I appreciate it. Thank you for answering the questions. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, members, and thank you, Director Messer, Hillary, and the rest of the MEDC group. I think it became pretty clear that we're pretty passionate about economic growth and competitiveness for the state of Michigan. And you had mentioned that perception not always meeting reality, and all of us, you included, are subject to the court of public opinion, which far too often is judged on perception over reality. So again, I can't thank you enough for coming in today and sitting on the hot seat for a little bit, but I think we can come to agreement as where we want to go, which is making Michigan, the best place in the nation to live, work, play, and raise your family. So with no further questions, I thank you again for your testimony.
Happy to do it.
And seeing no further questions, Representative Harris moves to excuse all absent members. And with there being no objections and no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.
Thank you.